Hello, everyone, and welcome to McGill Cares webcast series supporting family and informal caregivers. I'm Claire Webster, a former caregiver, certified dementia care consultant, and founder of the McGill University Dementia Education Program. I work with a dynamic team of leading healthcare professionals to oversee the program, who include Dr. José Moret from the Division of Geriatric Medicine, Dr. Serge Gauthier, McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging, and Dr. Gerald Freed, McGill Steinberg Center for Simulation and Interactive Learning. These webcasts are made possible thanks to the generosity of our donors, and I would like to thank Ryan and Dominic Lynham in memory of their wonderful nanas Stella Pearson and Muriel Wilson for supporting today's webcast. Today's topic is living well with dementia. Both of today's guests have been diagnosed with early onset dementia and have become well-known advocates for the rights of persons living with dementia, public awareness, and destigmatization of dementia and living well. Mary-Beth Wighton lives in Southampton, Ontario, and was diagnosed in 2012 with probable frontotemporal dementia at the age of 45. Since then, she has become an advocate for people living with dementia and a pioneer to advance the rights of persons with dementia. Mary-Beth is involved in numerous cross-sector projects involving research, policy development, including being a member on the Ministerial Advisory Board on Dementia and Alzheimer's Society of Canada's Dementia and COVID-19 Task Force. Mary-Beth has just released her first book, Dignity and Dementia, Carpe Diem, My Journals of Living with Dementia. She is co-chair of Dementia Advocacy Canada and is a part-time Behavioural Supports Ontario Lived Experience Facilitator. My other guest is Roger Marple. Since his diagnosis in the summer of 2015 at the age of 57, Roger has made it his mission to dispel myths about the disease and the stigma associated with dementia. He is a firm believer that you can live well with this disease, regardless of challenges, and is passionate about sharing his message of hope. Roger is a member of the Alzheimer Society of Canada's advisory group to help raise awareness of the needs of people with dementia, including the specific needs of people living with young onset and early stage dementia. He also serves on the board of directors of the Alzheimer Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories, and is active in supporting dementia research in Canada. Roger lives a full and meaningful life in Medicine Hat, Alberta. Welcome to McGill Cares.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, ditto.
So of all the webcasts that I've done, which I guess close to 45, you are my first guests who are people who are living with dementia. So I'm very, very happy to have you here, and so that you can share, your lived experience with our viewers today. So my first question, I guess I'll start with you, Mary-Beth, is so at this point, how many years has it been that you've been living with dementia, and what were some of the early signs and symptoms that created some awareness that something wasn't right?
Well, I was diagnosed at the age of 45 years old, and I'm 54 years old now, so it's 9, give or take. And initially, the signs weren't there, but they were more of a depression. And I had gone into a very serious depression. There was a lot of things going not so well in my life. And so that's what we initially contributed towards, was depression. But after, we got through the depression, we realized then that there were still cognitive issues that were there wasn't any reason for me to be having cognitive issues at that point. So, forgetting names, having a lot of banking issues, not truly understanding numbers, concepts were much more difficult for me. And so that's when we then started looking into a neurologist and memory doctors.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Roger? How many years ago has it been, and what were some of your early signs and symptoms?
I'd say it's been around 5 years for me. Initially, I can remember struggling with memory, but you got to understand that, when challenges start coming up, we have this remarkable knee-jerk way of putting things into place to overcome our shortcomings. And it's very gradual. People think that that we suddenly notice we're having memory issues, cognitive issues, but that's actually not the case. It sneaks up on you so that you compensate and you don't even know other people notice. But where it came to a head for me, I worked for Alberta Health Services, and I worked with a lot of Excel spreadsheets, analysis, that kind of thing. And I sent a spreadsheet to my boss. And after sending the spreadsheet to him, 90 seconds later, he replied and he goes, "What the hell is this?" And I opened up the spreadsheet and it didn't even make sense to me. And I had sent it 90 seconds before. So I was somewhat flabbergasted that I even sent that. And my boss, he was concerned. He started drilling down. He said, "Well, do you have a drug problem? Alcohol? How's your marriage?" Right? Like he's fishing for an explanation. And he went on to explain that a lot of people had mentioned that I seemed off. So at the end of the day, I didn't reach out to my doctor to pursue this until other people started saying, "Hey, something's not right, Roger." So that's what started the diagnostic process.
It's interesting, when Mary-Beth, especially when you had said it started with symptoms similar to depression. I mean, that is often, especially younger people, how depression is often mistaken for dementia, right? I mean, and because it's oftentimes, I think people automatically assume that, dementia equals memory issues, and it's not always the case, right? It could be some just changes in personality, like Roger, with your case, that it was interesting, the fact that somebody thought that you had an alcohol or drug problem, right? So it really shows the lack of awareness about the symptoms.
We were actually, I think I received about 15 different diagnoses, including that we had marital issues. Like, it was just so beyond anything that we were even experiencing. And yet I was forced to see a whole bunch of different doctors because that's what my medical plan was. I had to come up with all these different doctors. And so it's an incredibly stressful experience, that was for sure.
How did you know? So, when we talk about the very early beginning of getting the proper diagnosis, did you know what type of doctor to go and see? Like Roger, in your case, did you know who to see? Like, I mean, if you thought, for instance, if you were depressed, did you think I need to see a psychologist? Like, how did you know who to see?
Well, it was actually interesting. I initially went to my family doctor and I said, "I don't know, but I'm in trouble at work. And here's why," right? That kind of concern. And I said, I got to figure out what's going on here. And her response was, "Tell you what, Roger, we'll just check you for everything." Right? And, but I can remember about a week after doing some blood work, she called me back in her office and she said, "You have diabetes," right? And I said, "Eureka, there's my problem," right? And she goes, "Actually, no, Roger, diabetes doesn't give these kind of symptoms. I'm referring you to a neurologist."
Okay.
And then from there, I'd say the actual diagnosis took about 1.5 years.
Okay. And Mary-Beth, who was the first contact that you had with regards to health professionals?
My first was my general GP, and he was really a good doctor in that he knew there was something wrong. He had his own doubts, but wanted to get me in front of specialists. And he literally just almost went through his Rolodex with different types of doctors before we got the final diagnosis that I indeed have, probable frontotemporal dementia. But my GP was just stupendous. Yeah.
Can you both actually, I thought of this as an important question because a lot of people don't know what type of tests are performed in order to receive the diagnosis. So from both of you, what tests were done? So let's start with Roger. What tests were done?
I'm having a hard time remembering.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's my Achilles heel, but a lot of cognitive testing, and they also check for vitamin deficiencies, other things that it could be. There was a lot of that going on, right? And one by one, they'd rule it out until at the end of the day, there was nothing else that it could be, right? So it's a very methodical process, and it's, I hear they're batting around a 90% average for accuracy towards a dementia diagnosis. And I've been diagnosed with the same thing more than once as well, so. Okay,
and Mary-Beth, how about you?
The usual standard test is the MoCA test, and they compared a test at the beginning, and then a number of months later, I was put through another test, and it was a significant decline. The thing we have to be careful with is MoCA tests are really meant for people living with Alzheimer's, and it's not meant for people with frontotemporal dementia. So I was actually being given the wrong test, which many people don't know. And there's also, I think it's called Psychosocial Tests. It's a 6-hour test in total. And the intention is to really kind of try and do it all at once with you. And I can remember by the end of it, I was just absolutely exhausted, and I was lying on the ground still trying to answer the questions. And there was a real gamut of types of, you knew that they're trying to test different parts of your brain. So the psychosocial test, and that came out of Baycrest in Toronto, where, head of the neurologist kind of took it from there.
Yeah. So after you went through all the testing, you both received a diagnosis that you had dementia. How difficult was it to hear that news? Let's begin with Mary-Beth.
Traumatic. Part of the reason it was so traumatic is there wasn't a lot of leading up to suggesting that I had neuropsychological issues. So in one way, it just simply came as a complete surprise, and it was said in not a very helpful manner. It wasn't said with compassion, and it was very blunt. So, basically I have probable frontotemporal dementia, and, within 3 minutes I had lost my license right on the spot. And that I was told that there was not a cure, and that I was probably going to end up in long-term care, and my partner was going to take care of me. And if I had any credit cards or any banking information, for it to be basically hidden from me, for me never to receive that, because I might spend it. And, pack your bags and thanks for coming out. It was brutal, just brutal.
I need to attest to what you just said, because that was a similar process that I received with my mom. Having her license removed immediately, provided with no information. There's information available on the web if you need it, and basically, good luck, Mrs. Webster. That was it. So I can attest to what you went through. How about you, Roger? How was the news presented to you, and how did you receive it?
Well, my experience was totally different. When I first met the neurologist, he diagnosed me with MCI. Was that mean again?
Mild cognitive impairment.
Right, I forgot. So my doctor very carefully explained where he was going, right? He said it could be a vitamin deficiency, it could be this, it could be that, but it also could be a form of dementia. So it wasn't as if I didn't know where he was going. So when he finally did give me the diagnosis, it wasn't a total surprise, but I'll tell you something. Anytime your mortality is challenged, it's still rough, right? And it's not easy to even if you think it could be a possibility and you've been told it could be a possibility. It's a tough pill to swallow at the best of times.
Mm-hmm. So prior to receiving this diagnosis, were either one of you, did you know what dementia was? Did you have any familiarity with the illness? Did you know anything about it?
I think I knew the basics that create stigma. So I thought it was an old person's disease. People that were young certainly didn't get it. I didn't realize that there's so many different kinds, over 100 kinds of dementia, and that if you did get Alzheimer's, then that person would be very aggressive and swear and kick, and so all of the stigma. That was it. That's what I knew.
Mm-hmm. Roger?
Repeat the question, please.
So prior to receiving your diagnosis and prior to starting with your signs and symptoms, did you know anything about this illness before? Did you know what dementia was?
Yeah. Sorry. Well, I had an idea. I had worked for Alberta Health Services for many years, and I did a lot of, a fair amount of consulting in care facilities under the Alberta Health Services umbrella. Part of my job was on onboarding different areas that were coming under the Alberta Health Services umbrella. And one of them was an 8-unit care facility. So I had to onboard them, and I seen dementia up close and personal in my day-to-day work, but I still didn't know a lot about it, right? So I'm a researcher at heart, and when he told me dementia was a possibility, of course I read up on it, right? So I read up on it and had a better understanding. But like Mary-Beth, man, there's a lot of stigma attached to it.
Mm-hmm. So talking about stigma, I would really love to talk to both of you about your advocacy work. And I guess part of your mission is to demystify and break the stigma. So what led you to want to become advocates and become so public about your personal story? Mary-Beth?
I became an advocate probably about 4 months after my diagnosis. And what I realized very quickly was that there weren't people. I just wanted to talk to someone else who had dementia, frontotemporal dementia in particular. And there didn't seem to be anyone. And I thought, how can this be? How are we not talking with each other? And so, it was about 4 months after, and I started to work with an organization called MAREP, which is Murray Alzheimer's Research and Education Program. And that was out of the University of Waterloo, now Research and Aging. And at that time, they were creating a booklet called By Us, For Us Guides. And I was so amazed that people living with dementia were actually advocating for themselves. That was my very first experience. And I can remember seeing it, and I just said, this is what I want to do. I want to help contribute into the education and the awareness, because likewise, I have a very large family, and I couldn't really direct people to something that they could learn about FTD or, young onset. And so, I just wanted to be part of a solution versus someone who just complained. And frankly, it was quite easy to do because there was so much work to be done, and still is.
How about you, Roger? What led you to become an advocate?
I think, believe it or not, one of my very first encounters with my local Alzheimer's Society, I remember I went there looking for information, that kind of thing. And I remember asking the person, is it my imagination or is there a dark cloud hanging over this disease, right? Because I had experienced series of events that left me with a real bad taste in my mouth towards public perceptions. And to make a long story short, because we don't have a whole lot of time here, my Alzheimer's Society said, would you be interested in doing an article in a local paper towards dementia? And to make a long story short, when I said I would, I asked the reporter, I said, have you done many of these interviews? And she says, frankly, no. And for years, I've been trying to get one person to speak openly. And I found that was interesting. And I said, there's only one condition to the interview. And she goes, what's that? And I said, no doom and gloom. That's all I see.
No doom and gloom. Okay.
Yeah, I said, that's all I see. Right. End of life discussions, this kind of thing. And I said, man, with so many people being diagnosed, no wonder everyone's depressed and sad. Just learning about dementia in a reverse chronological order, basically. That's what's happening in society. So anyway, I said, it's got to be positive, upbeat. And the reporter was true to her word. And this was over 5 years ago. And to make a long story short, they put it on their Facebook page. And the article was short, sweet, but it was upbeat. It was positive. And what I found, and I never seen anything like it, it went worldwide, the article. Like I'm talking, I don't know if you call it virtual, but it was shared around the world, right? And it was an amazing experience because I was at the time you could track where the story was going, and it was being shared in countries I never even heard of.
What is the title of the article, Roger?
I don't know if it's in print anymore. The original article.
Okay, well, we'll try to find it, and we'll have to make a link to the article. So because and you're both so right, because when you normally hear the words you have dementia, there's so much doom and gloom, as you put it. But let's take the positive spin now. And so now what I would love to hear from you is people watching today, may have received the diagnosis themselves. What advice do you have to give to them? So let's start with Mary-Beth.
I think that the most important advice to give to someone that's newly diagnosed is that you can live well with dementia, period. And I mean, let the person try and understand what does that actually mean, living well. There's so much stigma, unfortunately, associated with that diagnosis. That's why if you can hook up into an organization that is doing advocacy work, or simply having coffee cafes virtually now because of COVID, try and find resources, and they're not a ton of them, but they are there, such as McGill Cares, that helps in one, the understanding of what you have, and two, that there are people you can talk with, and there are peers that you can learn more about the disease. So it's part of that is just understanding you can live well. It's not a death sentence. In this immediate, go home and pack your bags. It's not that at all. But you do have to do some work. And that's the important thing. If you do the work, you're going to find those resources, like Roger, like myself, and like the other organizations that support us, and obviously, Claire, your organizations like you.
Mhm.
So I would say that's the most important.
Roger, what about you?
Well, my advice to other people with dementia, there's 250 people a day being diagnosed with dementia in Canada, and that's according to Stats Canada. So here's the thing. There's a lot of perceptions out there. We definitely learn about dementia in a reverse chronological order in social media. So here's the thing. Like Mary-Beth said, there's a life after a diagnosis. It is not uncommon to live for a period of time, have a meaningful life in your life. So my advice is live life. Ignore all these perceptions, all these end of life discussions. Live in the here and now. Live right here, right now. Just live your life, whatever way that may look for you, whatever way that meaning has for you, and do it practically. Learn about your condition, whatever it is. Really take the time to learn it, because that way you can cross the bridges as they come. Mm-hmm. And remember the big four: attitude, diet, exercise, and most of all, engaging your mind. Mm-hmm. Right? And living with dementia requires work. And as you get your challenges, as they come up, I encourage you to put things into place to address the challenges. I have more memory techniques than you can shake a stick at. I use Google Home for reminders. I use technology all the time. I have a tracking system, GPS system, make sure I don't get lost. I put this in place as a proactive approach, not reactive. Don't be reactive, be proactive. And then get on with living your life, right? And ignore the negativity. Just don't let it get to you.
Those are just wonderful, wonderful words of advice. So one of my last questions before we talk about Mary-Beth's book is, so for the family care partners or informal care partners or friends and colleagues, what can they do to best support a person with dementia? Mary-Beth?
It's almost like mirroring what I would do, which is, to Roger's point, which is learn about the disease itself, and that there's more to the disease than just the illness and the sickness. And so educate yourself right away. And then the second thing, I think, is reaching out to that person who has dementia. And it's just, life is good, and we're going to work through this together, and I'm here to support you. And living in the moment. And so people can help you live in the moment by calling you up, by saying, let's go out for a coffee. We lose friendships along the way. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly difficult. Our relationships change with our family. And so it's working hard to get to be someone who's involved in that person's life, just like they normally would. Mm-hmm. I think that's important. Is just, so again, knowledge, and then being a supportive friend or partner or loved one.
Mm-hmm. Roger?
This is towards care partners.
Yeah. Or friends or colleagues.
From a family dynamic, loved ones, that kind of people that support us. I think some of the onus are depending where you are in the journey. I'm talking more in the functional stages of this journey. I would encourage family or friends, whatever, not to make assumptions. Don't over-enable them, right? Don't pamper them in the sense that don't assume they can't do it, right? If they're able to cut the lawn, kick their butt out the door and cut the lawn, right? That kind of family, they're still who they are. And I would encourage loved ones that are supporting people with dementia to help them be all they can be. I talked about Google Home for memory techniques and things like that, and exploring ways to do it, but help them to remain independent. That the more they push themselves, my theory is that you're going to engage your mind and you're going to live better. So help them be independent, and you're going to win from that. In other words, if they're using their own memory techniques, if they're doing this, doing that, approaching it from a positive point of view, it takes a lot of work off your shoulders, family care members, that kind of thing. And don't make assumptions, right?
I really
just because
like that.
you're having a crappy day one day, it could be a totally different picture the next. So I would encourage you to encourage the person with dementia to be all they can be and set the bar high.
Really, really great words of wisdom from you both. To end, how about Mary-Beth, you talk to us about your book and how people can get hold of it.
Well, first of all, thanks, Claire, for letting me talk about my book. One of the first things that was suggested to me 8 years ago was that I started to write about things that I was experiencing, and I've never written anything in my life, so I thought, oh, this kind of be interesting. And so I started to write what I call journals, and it's basically just a page or two or maybe three of anything that was coming to my mind, and I have 6 years of them. And I refer to it kind of like a Reader's Digest book, in that the topics are so varied, and some are funny, some are sad, some are just about information and knowledge, education. And so I just published it, let's see, I think about 4 weeks ago it came out. And there's a lot of interest in it because there's very few people with dementia who actually have produced a book. And the other thing with this book is I made the decision not to change any grammar, any words. It's just written as it is. So I didn't want it all polished up and everything. Just wanted to say these are my journals. And so I'm getting a really great response on it. And, it's a good general book. In particular, I think for people who are just wanting to meet someone who has dementia. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for joining me today. And I have to say, I'm feeling very, very moved by this interview. I'm moved by your positivity and your advocacy and creating awareness. And I've been a big advocate over the past few years on the importance of education and really learning and understanding, and very, very moving interview with you both. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks very much, Claire, for having me. And thank you, Roger.
My
thank
pleasure.
Thank you, Roger. So please, thank you so much. So please join me on Wednesday, June 9th with my guest, the well-known Dr. Joe Schwartz, Director of McGill University's Office for Science and Society, who will be giving a presentation on the topic of nutrition and healthy aging. This webcast is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is funded by private donations. Once again, I would like to thank Ryan and Dominic Lynham for supporting today's webcast in memory of their wonderful nanas, Stella Pearson and Muriel Wilson. If you would like to make a contribution to our program or for more information, please visit us at www.mcgill.ca/dementia. If you have any specific topics or questions or would like to reach us, please email us at dementia@mcgill.ca. Thank you for watching.